the perception of the media was perhaps how legal were these detainees that were being held by Israel. After that, polls showed there was a decline in sympathy for the Israeli view. Do you take that as anything?
There was certainly no justification to accuse Israel in any way, directly or indirectly, for the hijacking of the TWA plane. Of course, the Arab countries want to destroy Israel, many of them, with the exception of Egypt that signed the peace treaty, and maybe some other Arab countries would be ready one day to negotiate peace with us, but Israel is in a special position.
Yes.
And one part of the war against Israel is the psychological war, accusing the Jews, accusing Israel of anything that happens in the world.
That's an interesting point, the psychological war. Also, pardon me for bringing up polls so often, but also there's the indication that over these past few years, U.S. public sentiment in favor of the Arab cause has been increasing. It's still a small minority. I think it's been measured at 14%, but has tripled since '67. Do you see this as an alarming development? Do you see this as Arab propaganda winning?
Okay, let's look at the facts. In 1973, there was an attempt by the Arab countries, by the oil-producing countries, to impose their policy on the United States and on Western Europe by not providing them with oil. This is also a kind of terrorism. I don't think that this kind of action brought more sympathy to any Arab cause. This was not my impression at all. Now, there is today a peace treaty between Israel and Egypt.
Yes. And
public opinion knows very well what is the kind of sacrifice that Israel made in order to sign this peace treaty, giving up all of the Sinai, the oil wells of the Sinai, the Straits of Tiran, the city of Yamit and Ophira. We made all these sacrifices in order to sign a peace treaty with the first Arab country that was ready to do so. This kind of attitude, the fact that Israel accepts immigrants even if they are sick, without checking whether they have an amount of money necessary that other countries request, we accept anybody. All this has brought a lot of sympathy for Israel, not only in the United States, but all over the world. If you look at the case of the Ethiopian Jews,
yes.
I don't know if there are many countries in the world that would be ready today to accept the Ethiopian Jews.
Do you, going back to the point about increasing sympathy for Arabs in this country, do you see it as a true reflection of what's going on?
I did not read all these polls, and I don't think that, I think it would be exaggerated to say that there is a lot of sympathy, for instance, for terrorism in this country. On the contrary,
certainly.
I think that there is much more sensitivity today to the dangers of terrorism. And after all the attacks where American citizens were unfortunately killed, one realizes what kind of enemies Israel has to face.
There is a new book out called Media's War Against Israel by Stephen Kavitsky and Peter Goldman. And I have not read it, but they claim that very respectable American news operations have been misleading the American public about Israel and therefore undermining the Israeli cause. I'm wondering if you see this as being true in your experience of American media.
I think that it would be mistaken to say that all the media acts in this way when it comes to Israel. There were some reports from Beirut, as I said, during the war that did not reflect the truth. You had stringers, local people working for American networks, and they sent the stories from Beirut, and the kind of attacks that you have against Israel. I don't think that the entire press is against Israel. This is unfounded.
These people are making a case that it's not the isolated stringer, but even there's a chapter in it called The New York Times Propaganda War Against Israel.
So I would hate to refer to any specifics. One has to see it. You know, I've been a lawyer for all my life, so before accusing somebody in such a clear and unequivocal way, I would like to see the files and look into it. But there is no doubt that there was false reporting from Beirut. There were false accusations against Israel, and this has to be looked in and tried to prevent it in the future.
Are these false reports? Are we talking here about an isolated stringer, or are major news organizations guilty of doing this?
I did not study the issue to the point where I would be able to give a final judgment on that.
Okay, fair enough. Israel receives more aid from this country, $3.75 billion, than any other country. There are people who are looking at our trillion-dollar debt and calling for deep cuts to defense. I'm wondering if those deep cuts threaten Israel in any way.
We had to take measures in Israel proper to cut our defense budget as a result of our economic situation. Israel receives today about $1.2 billion from the United States for an economic aid, and $1.8 billion in military assistance, which is for purchasing weapons, mainly in this country, in order to enable Israel to defend itself from the Arab countries, of course. Now, the relationship, there is a strategic and military cooperation between the United States and Israel, and it's no secret that all the technological data on the Soviet weapon systems, the most sophisticated ones, like the MiGs 19, 21, 23, 25, or the missiles, the SAM 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the tanks, the T-54, 55, 62, all the radar systems, the electronics of the Soviet Union that unfortunately we have experienced, since we are the only Western country that for the last 37 years has experienced all the generations of Russian weapons. So all this technological data was transferred to the United States, and this has saved the United States many years of research and development and many billions of dollars. So this cooperation between Israel and the United States is not a one-way street.
No, it isn't a one-way street, but I'm wondering if those people who call for deep cuts in defense threaten this money, billions of dollars, that has been coming to Israel, as you say, for good reason, a good exchange of information.
But it's up to the United States to decide, of course, but a strong Israel is certainly in the best interest of the United States, because this is the only country that prevents this area from being taken over by the Soviet Union, where you have all the oil coming from there. Without Israel, the Soviet Union would certainly dominate all these countries there. Now there is a lot of instability in our region. There is this war going on between Iraq and Iran for close to 6 years, where you have already 1 million dead and about 200,000 prisoners of war. The only stability that you have in the region is the border between Israel and Egypt, and the fact that Israel is a democratic state shows to what extent this is important for the Western world. You had in Iran, you invested in Iran many billions of dollars, and did not help. We know what happens there now. So a strong Israel is certainly in the best interest of the United States, but this is up to the United States to decide, of course.
You do mention arms technology, Israel's intelligence about this. I'm wondering what your reaction is to President Reagan's recent statement that he would like to develop the Star Wars technology and then give this to the Russians.
Israel, by the way, is one of the countries that was approached by the United States to participate in the SDI program, but of course it's up to the United States dealing with the Soviet Union to decide what is in the best interest of the United States, and you don't expect me to take a position on that.
No, but I would ask you to talk about the advisability of developing weapon systems for space, and also what Israel's position is on that.
Now, of course, we haven't taken a stand on that, and it's up to, we have enough with our own problems that concern our area, and I think we have certainly the highest density of problems per square mile in Israel.
Yes.
So I would hate to start discussing global issues. Of course, we have our opinion on that, and when our Prime Minister and our Foreign Minister visited Washington lately, they did discuss these issues with the President of the United States. Now, when it comes to Russia, Israel is in a special position for another reason too. All these wars that were carried out against Israel were mainly with Russian weapons.
Yes.
The Soviet Union has no diplomatic relations with Israel for the last 18 years. They persecute and prevent the Jews from the Soviet Union to leave the Soviet Union, although about 400,000 Jews have applied for visas to go to Israel, to be reunited with their families. They are prevented from doing so.
Yes.
So we have very serious problems with the Soviet Union, and we hope that they will change their policy. And in this respect, the position adopted by the United States, both in bilateral talks with the Russians and in the UN forums and the Human Rights Commission, are extremely helpful in trying to solve this problem.
Was the Geneva Summit helpful in this area of Russian
I think
Jews?
it was. The issue was brought up, as we know, as one of the problems concerning human rights, and we do hope that the Soviet Union will change its attitude. Unfortunately, in spite of all the hopes and the promises made up till now, there has been absolutely no change in the policy of the Soviet Union towards the Jews in Russia.
There was talk during the Geneva Summit about, it's hard to believe if this is true, but Russia actually allowing an airlift of Soviet Jews out of Russia to Israel.
Unfortunately, there was no such promise made by the Soviet Union. We have asked for many years that to enable the Jews that are permitted to leave the Soviet Union to go directly to Israel. As a result of the Jackson-Vanik Amendment at the time, the Soviet Union did allow in 1979 about 51,000 Jews to leave the Soviet Union, but in the meantime, and especially this last year, they did not allow Jews to leave. The number of Jews leaving the Soviet Union is about 100 per month, and at this speed, I think it will take several hundred years before all the Jews that want to leave Russia will be able to do so.
Why did so many more leave under Carter than Reagan? Are you content that Reagan's pushing the issue hard enough?
First of all, I wouldn't like to make any comparisons between American administration. I think that we are very grateful to the United States, to the President and the Secretary of State for having raised this issue and having raised it publicly more than once. And this is extremely helpful. It is helpful for the morale of Soviet Jews. They should know that they are not forgotten. And secondly, the Soviet Union should know that they must change their policy towards the Jews living in the Soviet Union, to allow those that want to leave to leave.
Do you believe that Gorbachev is the man to do that, to change that policy?
Whoever is in charge of the policy of the Soviet Union should know that the world is very sensitive on this issue, and they should change their policy.
Ambassador Rosén, I'd like to switch our conversation now to focus on prospects for peace in the Middle East, a very important issue, worldwide importance. In February of '85, King Hussein puts forth some type of complicated proposal for peace, which brings in the Palestinians and eventually down the line would talk about direct negotiations. Could you outline for us what has been put on the table and what the Israeli posture is toward it now?
I can tell you what the policy of Israel is on that issue, and this is the consistent policy of Israel since the establishment of the state. We are ready to sit down and negotiate with any Arab country that is ready to negotiate peace with us with no preconditions, all on the basis of Camp David. Since 1978, there is a Camp David Accord that was signed and which provides for a plan for the establishment of peace in the Middle East. The second point I would like to mention is that the impression one has is that in the absence of a negotiation between Arab countries and Israel, you have in fact three negotiations going on. One negotiation that goes on between Jews and Jews, as if anybody had a power of attorney from any Arab country to sign peace for them. Yes. And the second negotiation going on between the United States and Israel, and different plans are being submitted, and this creates sometimes problems between our two countries unnecessarily, because we are not at all sure that any Arab country would accept the kind of plans that we are discussing. And the third negotiation goes on between Arab countries themselves concerning peace in the Middle East. So all these problems could be solved very easily if the Arab countries would really be ready to negotiate peace with us.
You believe they're not ready now?
Now, this is the impression. When Egypt thought that the best way to reach an agreement was to have negotiations. They came, President Sadat came to Jerusalem, we started negotiations, and today between the 48 million Egyptians and the 4 million Israelis you have peace.
What would
you
be
have
the
daily flights, and although we have some problems on the Taba problem and the normalization issue, the fact that Egypt has withdrawn its ambassador from Israel, contrary to the provisions of the treaty, but we hope that these problems will be solved. Nothing prevents Jordan from suggesting or from accepting a negotiation with Israel with no preconditions or on the basis of Camp David. If they want to have Palestinians in the Jordanian delegation, it's all right with us. It's provided for in the Camp David Accords too. Now, we thought that King Hussein really intended to start negotiations with us. Unfortunately, in the meantime, since February, he has reached an agreement with the Syrians that there will be no negotiation between Jordan and Israel unless the Syrians and the Soviet Union participate in such a negotiation. We know that nothing can come out from a negotiation, this kind of negotiation, since Syria has permanently and steadily refused any recognition of Israel, and the number of tanks that Syria has now shows to what extent they are not ready to sit down and negotiate peace with us. And unfortunately, in spite of the hopes we had to see King Hussein starting a negotiation with us, unfortunately we see that each time he has additional conditions that he set, that put forward.
Okay. So you're saying that the presence of Syria and Russia at the table would not be acceptable to Israel. What about the presence of Yasser Arafat, which seems to be what Hussein is talking about?
Certainly not, and in this respect I don't think that there is any difference of opinion in Israel. Israel is not ready to sit down and negotiate with a leader of a terrorist organization. Quite often comparisons are being made between the PLO and Arafat and, for instance, the movement for the liberation of Algeria at the time. And we are told, after all, the French, when they wanted to reach peace with the Algerians, they sat down and negotiated with a terrorist organization.
Yes.
But there is a basic difference. The National Liberation Movement of Algeria never claimed that France had no right to exist, and they never wanted to establish their capital in Paris. This is not the case for Arafat. They do not hide their intention to destroy the state of Israel, and this is it's written very clearly in the covenant that the aim of the organization is to destroy Israel by all possible means, including armed struggle.
Yes.
So he cannot sit down and negotiate anything with us. We hope that the Palestinians that want to reach peace with Israel, and this is certainly the majority, they will elect and find their representatives that will sit down with the Jordanians, with us, in order to negotiate peace. Unfortunately, this hasn't yet happened.
In this country, Yasser Arafat could be, there was a while there when he was really on television every night during the time of the Achille Lauro incident and times before and after. He is appearing perhaps perceived almost as a moderate now, and pressure coming to the White House saying, look, if we can sit down and talk to the Russians, why can't we sit down and talk to Arafat? Do you see that kind of pressure building and meaning anything?
I don't think that he is conceived as a moderate in this country. After all, Arafat admitted being responsible for the killing of the American ambassador in Khartoum several years ago. He was the man who organized the hijacking of the Achille Lauro. He is the man who sent these killers in the different airports to kill innocent people, to hijack planes. And so I don't think that today you have many people in the United States consider Arafat as being a moderate. I remember the statement that was made by high American officials during the crisis of the Achille Lauro, referring to these terrorists as animals.
And yet this man does have access in a quite a remarkable way to millions of Americans. It must seem peculiar to you, I would guess.
The fact that I don't think that The fact that he's on television shows that he has much support in this country.
Okay.
It was because he was responsible for this hijacking. At that time, he intended to come and speak at the UN, and I think that part of the responsibility for the terrorist attacks around the world lies with the UN that gave Arafat a standing ovation some 11 years ago when he came with his gun to the UN, and he was given the treatment of a head of state. So those that applauded them shouldn't be surprised that you have still to deplore so many acts of terrorism carried out by the PLO, whether in a supermarket in Paris or at the Athens airport.
In the few minutes that remain, Ambassador, I'd like to hit some topics briefly, if we could. Starting with the peace treaty with Egypt. It survived the assassination of Sadat. It survived the invasion of Lebanon. What's your reading now on President Mubarak's pursuit of peace?
We hope that the problems that we have with Egypt will be solved. There is a delegation of Egyptians now meeting on this Tuesday, with an Israeli delegation, and in order to try and solve the different problems that are still outstanding.
The economy, we certainly hear things are, we are not encouraged by what we hear. Will things get worse before they get better? Do you see hopeful signs?
I think that we should be encouraged about what goes on with the Israeli economy, a country that has to spend so much money on defense. We have taken very severe measures. We have close to 100,000 people unemployed in Israel. We have fired about 9,000 people from the civil service, and the standard of living went down by about 20%. The Israeli pays the highest taxes in the world, about up to 70% of his income. Because of the security situation, every Israeli must serve in the reserves until the age of 55 for 2 to 3 months a year. So we did manage to bring down the inflation rate from 1,000 to about 200, which is a lot still, but we hope that in a year from now we'll reach the normal rate of inflation that you have in other countries.
The normal high rate of inflation. In light of the high unemployment you mentioned, this runaway inflation, I'm wondering if this peace movement that sort of abhors the climate of violence that has been existing in Israel, you find that this movement is gaining strength?
Everybody in Israel wants peace, and we have shown to what extent we are ready to make sacrifices in our peace treaty with Egypt. I think that any accusation of intransigence is certainly unjustified. So we hope that peace does not depend on us. Peace depends on the Arab countries. So we hope that the Arab countries will understand that if they want to find solutions to their economic problems, and if they want really to live in peace, they should come forward, sit down, and negotiate freely peace with Israel. Peace cannot be imposed from the outside, and this they must understand.
Ambassador Razin, we want to thank you very much for coming here today and helping us understand this difficult, complex relationship between the U.S. and Israel. And we appreciate your time very much. Thank you. And we appreciate your time, too. Thanks for stopping in, and we hope we'll see you again. Shalom.